Yeah, I can start.
Testing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Yavapai College Sedona Center.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to this community dialogue. My name is Andrea Christel. I'll be your facilitator, and our topic today is short-term rentals. We want to thank our sponsors for this event, the Sedona Lodging Council and the Sedona Chamber of Commerce, both of which are represented on the panel. When we started this program, we thought that there would be a lot of interest, but we had no idea how much interest there would be. And so we're really happy to see everyone here today. This is also being recorded people are participating via Zoom. It's being recorded in the back. So all the information that's shared here today will be available for your future reference. So when we got such a overwhelming response, we put out a little survey and we said, why are all these people coming to this meeting? What are their interests? And half of you responded to the survey, which is amazing. If you know anything about surveys, a 50% response rate is like what people sending out surveys dream about, like 7% is considered to be good. But half of the people responded, and that again is indicative of how much people care. And one of the things that we want to say is that this event is not and has never been intended to be pro short-term rental or anti short-term rental. It's not about that. We are not taking any sides here. What we want to do is learn more about it. And I'd like to tell you the results of this survey. Now, this isn't going to add up to 100% because everybody could pick more than one. We just said, of all these reasons, what are you interested in? And 62% said that they're interested in the community and neighborhood atmosphere. 55% are interested in affordable housing options. 37.5% are interested in their community and neighborhood safety, and that same number is interested in traffic. 27.5% are interested in offering short-term rentals, and 17.5% are interested in parking. And we had a few other responses. So people are really interested in this issue from a number of different points of view, and we'll have a number of different points of view represented here today. After our expert presentations, we'll have an opportunity to line up over there. You can ask questions. We'll also take questions from those of you joining via Zoom. So if you're on Zoom, just put your questions in the chat and we'll consider those as well. So thanks everyone for being here today. And now I will turn it over to the City Attorney, Kurt Christianson.
Thank you, Andrea. How's the volume? Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, excellent. So good afternoon and thank you for the welcome, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Kurt Christianson. I'm the City Attorney for the City of Sedona. And I hope not to bore you in my few minutes time that I have and the few slides that I have about the history a little bit of short-term rentals in the City of Sedona. And it begins back in 1995. I shared the PowerPoint. I'm just wondering, did it come on the PowerPoint? Not. Oh, we are okay. Is it shared? With what? This isn't a clicker. Oh, there we go. Did you do this? Yeah, there you go. All right, there we go. So I'll talk a little bit about the regulatory authority and limitations that the city has, and specifically about the background. So I want to start there. So in 1995, the city enacted a prohibition on short-term rentals, any residential rental of less than 30 days. And they did so through the city's zoning code, the Sedona Land Development Code. And it was simple. All it said was rentals of single-family dwellings for periods of less than 30 consecutive days is prohibited. And that was in the Sedona Land Development Code. So that lasted from about that time until 2017 when the law changed on the city. Now, during that period, there was ups and downs on how well the city was able to enforce that regulation. There was always people trying to do short-term rentals under the radar. Sometimes the city would do well, sometimes the city would fall behind. Fast forward from 1995, about 10 years to 2006, there was a new law passed, the Private Property Rights Protection Act, Prop 207, and that's not to be confused with last year's Prop 207 legalizing recreational marijuana, but we reuse the same numbers over and over again, so they can get confusing. So the actual statute is in ARS Title 12, Section 1134, and the Private Property Rights Protection Act enabled any property owners in the state of Arizona, and that was a proposition passed by the residents, to claim just compensation against the city for a land use regulation. And a land use regulation was any ordinance, resolution, law, regulation that affected how someone could use their property or subdivide their property. And that has, it's still in effect today, the Private Property Rights Protection Act. It colors a lot of what the city does. Anytime we pass a zoning ordinance, we have to ask ourselves, will this diminish the fair market value of residents or property owners? And if so, are we prepared to pay that diminishment in value? Are we prepared to either waive that to that property owner? And the statute of limitations for the Private Property Rights Protection Act is 3 years. So from 3 years from the time we pass a zoning ordinance, owner who feels like their property was hurt has 3 years to file a claim against the city. That proposition was, and this name will come up a couple times in my presentation, was proposed and drafted by the Goldwater Institute. So that's the proposition 207. So after that, we come across a case that I don't know how many people have heard this of, but this is really kind of pivotal in the history of Sedona and short-term rentals for the state. Sedona Grand LLC versus the city of Sedona. So about in 2006, about that same time that the Private Property Rights Protection Act was enacted, the city was getting lots of complaints from residents about short-term rentals, saying they're violating the land development code. You need to do something about it. The city's like, well, we have it in our ordinance. We can go and get them to try to stop. They don't stop. They just start up again. Well, we need more teeth, is what the city felt, in order to enforce that. And so they passed an ordinance that making and this is I'll call it the enforcement ordinance. It was in 2008, January, making it a class 1 misdemeanor to rent out a short-term rental in violation of the land development code. A class 1 misdemeanor can be punished by 6 months in jail and $2,500 in fines. So they figured that would get people's attention. Well, it did. It got Sedona Grand's attention, and they filed a lawsuit against the city and said this violates the Private Property Rights Protection Act. And so the city said, whoa, 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 and they filed a lawsuit. And I don't know if Goldwater Institute was counsel at the beginning. I don't think they were, but they became counsel at some point during the next 8 years or 7 or 8 years of litigation. And the Goldwater Institute argued that the city was violating the new Private Property Rights Protection Act, which they had written. So they felt pretty confident about that. And the city said, no, we're not, because it was already in the land development code. So there's no zone change has happened. You couldn't rent short-term rentals before, and so you still can't do it. And Sedona Grand was saying, well, we're not doing short-term rentals. We're offering option agreements. People want to come look at our house and consider if they want to buy it. And so we'll rent it. We'll give them an option for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 days. And they can live it, stay in it for a couple of days. And that's just an option on whether or not they really want to buy the house or not. And the city was able to get affidavits from a number of those option agreement people that said they had no intention of ever buying it. They were just using it as a short-term rental. But the litigation was just starting. So so that's enforcement ordinance. I think I went through all that already. The first round of litigation takes the better part of 4 years because of discovery, motions to dismiss, cross motions to dismiss. The city court, Superior Court, Yavapai County, found that the enforcement of the ordinance fit under the city's public health and safety regulations. And that's what the city, when they enacted the new 2008 enforcement regulation, that's what they claimed. They claimed, here's the reasons we're doing this. They said, the number of occupants occupying such temporary rentals has the potential to exceed standards for the design capacity of such structures and to cause health and safety problems, and as such may constitute threats to the health and safety of neighbors and nearby properties. The purpose is to safeguard the peace, safety, and general welfare of the residents of Sedona and their visitors and guests by eliminating noise, vandalism, overcrowding, neighborhood uncertainty, high occupant turnover, diminution of neighborhood character, and other secondary effects that have become associated with the illegal short-term rental of single-family dwellings. So that sounds good, right? That's the city's reason for it. And the Superior Court agreed with the city. They said, yeah, that's a valid reason. Regulations for public health and safety are an exception to the Private Property Rights Protection Act. And if you'll notice when we get to it, SB 1350 and the current short-term rental law has the same exception for public health and safety reasons. The city can still regulate short-term rentals. So the Superior Court agreed, but it went to the Court of Appeals. Sedona Grand appealed it, and they determined that it was not a public health and safety concern, or that the city hadn't met its burden. They said in order to prove that the city has the right to regulate short-term rentals for public health and safety concerns, they have to prove by preponderance of the evidence that it's an actual health and safety issue. And they used two other cases, for example, a Phoenix case that was about trash and garbage and nuisances, and they talked, and that ordinance talked about how they could bring in vermin and critters and cause fires. And so they said that's a clear nexus. They used another case out of Gila County, up over by Payson in the Coles Ranch area, and they said that it was a floodplain issue, and they said there's a clear nexus between building in a floodplain and the hazards that can come from flooding and the damages and mosquitoes and disease and all types of stuff that can come with living in a floodplain. And then they turned to the city and they said, here the nexus between prohibition of short-term occupancy and public health is not self-evident, and the governing body must do more than incant the language of a statutory exception to demonstrate that it is grounded in actual fact. Indeed, the ordinance's own text suggests that its purpose is to protect the character of the neighborhoods. This may be a desirable goal to policymakers, but the neighborhood character and public health are entirely distinct concepts. To invoke the exception, the city must provide evidence beyond mere legislative assertion, so what the city council asserted to in its ordinance, to carry the burden that the act assigns to it. And so the Superior Court, or the Court of Appeals, remanded to the Superior Court to find out two things. One, and first, I think primarily, was option agreements prohibited under the old Sedona Land Development Code, prohibition against short-term rentals? And then two, what was the primary purpose of the city's ordinance? Was it truly to a health and safety reason, or was it preservation of the community? And so that started the second round of litigation that went from 2012 to 2015, again, because of discovery, evidentiary hearings, motions for summary judgment, and then finally it ended up, neither side was ended up being a little bit of a draw. I think the city came out the best though, because the second time around, the Yavapai County Superior Court found that the option agreement was prohibited under the old, or under the, what was old now, but current then, Sedona Land Development Code prohibition on short-term rental. But then they found that the record was void of statistics on health or safety problems caused by short-term rentals. Public Works didn't report an increase in traffic. Code enforcement didn't report trash collection problems. Police department didn't report increase in traffic citations, parking violations, or disturbing the peace. The fire department didn't report safety hazards, and the zoning department didn't report safety concerns. So the city did not prove by preponderance of the evidence that the law was enacted to protect the public's health and safety. So the city won the battle. Sedona Grand LLC was not able to continue to operate as a short-term rental at that time, but it lost the war the next year. So Goldwater, that ruling came out in 2015, February, March. The next legislative session, January 2016, they sponsored legislation prohibiting cities from enacting any type of regulation, regulating short-term rentals, except for the public health and safety issues, which they already knew how the courts are going to rule on that, because they've had the example from Sedona Grand. Unless you've got some evidence, reports, statistics to show that a short-term rental is significantly more dangerous than a regular residence, and for some reason, then you're not going to be able to regulate it. And so they sponsored that, and then it was enacted, as we'll see in just a minute. So let me make sure I'm covering everything I want to. All right, we will move forward. Oh yeah, so the city did try a couple of things. One of them was to require short-term rentals to have a business license. Arizona Attorney General researched that at the request of the state legislature. SB 1487 was passed about backing up before the cases. It was passed and it allowed any legislator, any member of the legislature to request the Arizona Attorney General research any city law that was passed by city council to see whether it complies with the Arizona Constitution or state law. And if it doesn't, then they can withhold the state shared revenue, like the HERF fund, highway user revenue fund, and other funds that we receive from the state, including funds that the state collects for us and then gives back to us. And then this law, just as a side note, was just updated this last legislative session, SB 1487, to include, it used to just be council actions, now includes any written policy, written rule, or written regulation adopted by any agency, department, or other entity of the county, city, or town. So now, even if the Parks Department has a policy on who knows what, about swimming at certain hours, if someone believes that's, a state legislature believes that's unconstitutional, they can ask the Attorney General to investigate the Parks and Recs rule or policy. It was primarily geared towards police departments and their policies. They wanted to be able to have oversight over individual cities' police department policies. So there's, 1487, we get up to the 1350 as I started talking about. Other than health and safety reasons, it did preempt cities from regulating short-term rentals. Has been amended a couple of times since that. It also did not require the short-term rentals to pay any taxes at first. That was real good for the short-term rentals. Airbnb did, I think as part of that agreement, can enter into an agreement with the state where they would collect taxes on their behalf. And then their response was, well, even if cities can't regulate short-term rentals, HOAs still can. HOAs can through declarations. Well, that only works if the HOA has sufficient funds to hire attorneys to fight wealthy owners who own short-term rentals. It also only works if the HOA actually has prohibitions on short-term rentals. The oldest CC&Rs don't generally have strong language about that. Newer ones do. And it only works if the HOA is actually really functioning. The newer HOAs do. They tend to have, $100 a month HOA fees due from members. Old ones might have $30 a year, which isn't enough to cover, any type of insurance or litigation expense for an HOA to try to enforce the rule. So the city on its HB 1487 complaint against business licenses, the Attorney General concluded that the city's business license was specific. It didn't touch on short-term rentals. The city was smart about how it enacted. It said that it just simply said that every transient lodging establishment located within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city of Sedona shall obtain a city of Sedona business license. So nothing in there about short-term rentals. Just if you're transient business lodging, you have to get a business license. And the AG agreed that didn't violate SB 1350, the short-term rental law, but they found another law that it did violate, ARS 9-1305, which prohibits municipalities from adopting a residential rental license requirement. So that brings us up to the current, where am I clicking? It's not moving. Did it go to sleep? Or am I pointing at the wrong way? Whoops. There we go. So the current short-term rental law, SB 1350 as amended, is now ARS 9-539, and it prohibits from prohibiting vacation rentals. And a city cannot restrict use, regulate vacation rentals or short-term rentals based on classification, use, or occupancy, except in a couple of areas. One's, sexually oriented businesses. We won't talk about that one, but the two that apply here are protecting the public's health and safety, including rules and regulations related to fire. And I wanted to stop right there on fire. When you think of fire regulations that the city could do, what might be the first thing you think of, especially since Sedona doesn't even have a fire department, we have the fire district. The first thing I think of would be fire sprinklers in the house. Some other communities require that, but that's not allowed either by the state. They passed a law a year ago that prohibits any municipality from requiring fire sprinklers in a single family resident unless they had the law in the books prior to 2008 or 9. We did not, because we had the fire district. Luckily, the fire district does have that rule. And then it says, the city can regulate based on building codes, health, sanitation, transportation, traffic control, solid or hazardous waste, and pollution control. The city does regulate on all those areas, but those regulations have to apply uniformly to all residences, or currently we apply them all uniformly to all residences, businesses, and they're pretty prescriptive. Anyone who's tried to build a house or a building in Sedona will know that it's not easy to meet all of the building code standards, and that it takes some thought and some planning in order to successfully, construct a appropriate house here within the city. And so it's not something that we're looking to add on to those to make things harder for residents or businesses, but it is an option. So if we can find a way through studies, through reports, through investigations, through statistics, as the court talked about, then we could perhaps regulate short-term rentals based on public health and safety concerns. But to date, no city that I'm aware of has found has done either the appropriate studies or found the appropriate studies to show that short-term rentals are a public health safety concern more than a regular residence. And then it talks about, and that's just the Sedona Grand case, that you have to prove that it's truly a public health and safety benefit, not something else. And then the second part, subpart 2 of the ordinance, it talks about adopting and enforcing residential use in zoning districts. And that would only be if it applied to all residences uniformly, as it says at the end of that. So it has to be the same manner as other property classified under those 2 Title 42 sections, which are single family residences. And so if you can think of a way to regulate residences within the city, we're all open to use, regulate short-term rentals. Regulate all residences, I guess, within the city, but in a way that would only have a detrimental effect to short-term rentals and a positive effect on regular residences. We'd be happy to consider that. Residents have and continue to provide us ideas for regulating short-term rentals, and we're happy to look at all of those. I look at them, and we haven't found any that we feel comport with the law or feasible at this time. Generally, they have to do with size limitations. A lot of the residents that ideas we get would just limit the size of houses down to maybe 3 bedrooms or 1 stories, or require extra garage space or separate garages. Any action like that the city were to take would have Prop 207, the Private Property Rights Protection Act issues, and would subject the city to fair market compensation claims, just compensation claims from short-term rental owners or any property owners if they could no longer build the larger house that they wanted to and they were forced to build something smaller. So just to wrap up here briefly, there continue to be some laws passed in 2019. It did finally require the online short-term rental marketplaces to remit their taxes. And then in 2019, I went too far. There we go. HB 2672 allowed us to register emergency contacts. Well, that's a step. So we at least know someone to contact at a house. And Karen's going to talk more about that. And also required that they post a tax identification number. And then it's not like the city hasn't, the city continues to engage the legislature and continues to work with the League of Arizona Cities and Towns that represents all 91 cities and towns. But there's also smaller groups that are specifically focused on short-term rental regulation and controlling the detrimental effects that short-term rentals have within neighborhoods. I mean, I'm a native of Arizona, but I grew up mostly down in the valley. And so when you grow up in Mesa or live in Mesa, you think, oh, what's the big deal about a few short-term rentals? It's completely different when you move to a small town and realize that some people are surrounded by short-term rentals. So the city continues to work with them. On the list here, you'll have the failed short-term rental legislation. There's a handful of every year. No one tried to pass anything in 2017, which was the first year it went into effect. But after that, there's been bills passed each year. Really interesting are the House concurrent resolution and the Senate concurrent resolution, the HCR and the SCR, 2021 and 2020. Those got zero traction in the legislature, but they would refer the issue back to the residents, to the citizens of Arizona, on whether or not cities should be allowed to regulate short-term rentals. And so I think that'd be one appropriate place to resolve this. And with that, that's the history and a little bit of the background on short-term rental, and I'll turn the time over to our our city manager, Karen Osburn.
Am I going? Oh, I've got it upside down. That would make sense why. Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Karen Osburn. I'm the city manager in Sedona, and I was asked to come and talk a little bit about the community impacts of short-term rentals, the things that we've been seeing with over the years and things that we've been trying to address with our very limited authority from the state of Arizona. And then to talk about, well, what are the things that we have done and implemented in the last couple of years, which again, maybe I'll make up some time for Kurt. I could talk about the impacts for the rest of the session, but the things that we are able to do, although we are implementing all of them, in fact, much more than many of our other counterparts in cities and towns throughout the state, it is still very limited. So in terms of community impacts, this list is not in any particular order, but I do think it's appropriate that housing availability and affordability is right at the top. This is a huge priority issue. It's a policy priority for the city and the city council. And while it has been for a number of years, I think that at this point, we have not seen it at this level of urgency that we have right now. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Kurt mentioned our building codes and land development codes. Our land development code basically dictates what can be built and where it can be built. And our building code regulates how it can be built, like to what standards do people have to build. And we differentiate those ordinances and those rules in all those codes based on use. That is the basis by which we make decisions locally about what can and can't be done. So for example, for a hotel, the use is what dictates what all the requirements are about where hotels can be placed, how you have to build, what kind of safety features and so forth. I'll also touch on, just give some examples of that as well. The loss of neighbors and neighborhoods, when we are looking at particular segments of our community where we have 12 to 20 to 30 or more % of those residential units converted to short-term rentals, that does change the character of the community. There is no question or debate about that. Even if our visitors who are renting short-term rentals are polite and respectful, they are not neighbors. And when you convert and you no longer have neighbors and you no longer have neighborhoods, you no longer have a community. You have one big resort. Decrease in permanent population and school enrollment. Clearly, school enrollment is down. We've seen a school close in recent years. There has been a decrease to our permanent population as a result of short-term rentals. So our latest numbers that we were using for city population was 10,300. That's the number that's kind of been around for a while now. That was valid as of 2019. We just got the 2020 census numbers. They just recently came out, and that number was 9,684. So we are now a community of under 10,000. And this number, this is a 2020 number being reported in 2021 that was counted several years ago. So this is already an old number. We have seen increases to some of those nuisance issues, and I'll get into when I talk about the complaint hotline and how we've been tracking data. As Kurt mentioned, we cannot impose ordinances or new rules or regulations without a nexus to a problem. And so this is why it's been important for the city to take those steps to monitor and to track what's happening with short-term rentals in our community. Based on all of those nuisance issues, it has put a strain on our resources. Our code enforcement division has 2 full-time employees. So and we'll be talking about some of those additional issues that have
proliferated since the advent of short-term rentals that are exclusive to short-term rentals, but that have increased that workload really significantly. And now we have to make some decisions, some policy decisions about where do we invest our financial resources. We could use a team of individuals to go out and tackle some of these things and take them through a process. And in terms of some positives, there have been property upgrades. And so we're seeing not just individuals coming in and buying properties and converting to short-term rentals, but the corporations and folks buying numerous. But what they do also want to do is improve them, because they're competing with many hundreds of other short-term rental units, and they want to be attractive to their prospective tenants. So we have seen improvements to properties, particularly exterior facades, which has enhanced the aesthetic of neighborhoods. And then finally, while this is a very small segment, and we'll talk about those numbers, but a small segment of short-term rental owners are actually living at the residence. They are renting a room, they are renting a guest house. And I think that was really, at least from the legislators that I've had the opportunity to speak with on this issue, that was the intent. It was to help grandma, provide a little bit of supplemental income, allow her to stay in her home. And that is helping people in our community. It is less than 20% of the total number of short-term rentals, but it is a benefit for those individuals who are using it that way. As far as the affordable housing crisis, this is what we titled the slide, and I don't think that that's hyperbole to refer to it that way. We have, like I said, I don't want to purport that short-term rentals are the cause of the affordable housing crisis in Sedona. Housing has been affordable for years, for a long time. I can say with confidence that they have exacerbated the problem. And to what degree they have, I don't have that data specifically, but between investors coming in with cash, buying up and decreasing the inventory, when you see a median sales price of $479,000 at the end of 2016, and short-term rentals became a thing, a legal thing in January of 2017, and 4.5 years later, that median price is over $750,000, there is something else than just normal market appreciation at play there. I would be remiss to talk about affordable housing crisis and just talk about the sale product. The rental product is probably even more of a challenge, particularly for our local workforce. So throughout the last few years, as the council and the city has made affordable housing a higher policy priority, and we've given more attention to that area and seeing how we can start to tackle that and fill the gap. And talking about short-term rentals over the course of the last several years, I have periodically been checking these numbers. So we don't have hard data like we do on number of short-term rentals on leases. But we check the MLS periodically, and in the last few years, the highest number of rentals listed in the MLS at any given time that I have looked at has been 18. Today, this morning, there were 12. Now, bear in mind, we have a community that has, this is just within Sedona city limits. So this isn't Greater Sedona, this is just our jurisdictional boundaries. There are over 6,700 residential units, and you have 12 listed this morning for lease. The least expensive of that was a 455 square foot studio apartment, 455 square feet for $2,000 a month. And these are long-term rentals. That did include utilities. The single family homes, which were the other 11 units, ranged in price from $3,150 a month to $11,500 a month. The average of those 12 listings was over $6,300 a month. So in terms of affordability, those are really large numbers, But just the availability is, I mean, 12 out of over 6,700 is pretty staggering. And as a consequence, and some of you may have seen, I did a presentation a while back where I actually had pictures of some of the living conditions that our code folks and our building safety folks have seen in the community in the last several years. And that's people, local workforce living in sheds in people's backyard, in crawl spaces, really substandard living conditions. We see RVs proliferating throughout the community in people's driveways or on people's properties, not with hookups, and that is not legal in the community, but this is what people are resorting to be able to find a place to live. I mentioned the land development and the building safety, our building code. So this is just a list. I'm not going to run through that of the things, this is not an exhaustive list, but a list of many of the things that are required of hotels. If they come in and they want to do a transient occupancy use, they have to have all the safety stuff, the sprinklers, the emergency egress, the fire alarms and lighting and ADA accessibility, and the list goes on and on. Our land development code says you cannot build a hotel in a residential neighborhood. Our zoning for residential will not allow you to put a commercial use, and that's a commercial business use, but 1350 preempts all that. And so now we do see business uses throughout the neighborhoods. And that's our challenge, is trying to find, how do we write codes that apply to all residential, as Kurt mentioned. This is an example of a short-term rental property that the city has been trying to enforce on for several years. It is an out-of-state owner. It is a hotelier that owns this property and went in and turned a 4-bedroom, 3-bath-ish home to a 5-bedroom home with 4.5 bathrooms. They put a deck on the patio and did some other modifications with no building permits whatsoever. And you would think that a hotelier somewhere in the industry would know that that's what you do. We've tried to serve this person who is an out-of-state owner. It's a long process, very resource intensive. We have photographs because we had the before pictures, because this was a for sale property that was purchased and then converted. And then we have the postings from the Airbnb listings or the online marketplace listings, which is how we got this. And this was enough to get an administrative search warrant to get into the home. And this just takes, again, a lot of time and labor to be able to even do that. And this is not done yet. The spa, which is advertised as accommodating up to 6 people, was put on a deck. Now, this has since been permitted. It is structurally safe, but this is the kind of thing that's a recipe for disaster, and why we have certain building codes in place that our inspectors go out and check the structural integrity to make sure that that isn't going to fall through the deck when you've got 8 people and a bunch of water. And that's a really heavy thing to put on a deck. The picture on the right is even more egregious. This is advertised. This is from the advertisement this morning, although they have been instructed by the city that they are not to occupy this room for sleeping quarters. But this is 6 double beds. And now they advertise it as, I think, a desk for gaming, and they've got the beanbag. So to me, this screams bunk room for a bunch of kids, when their parents are going in and renting this home. This is in a basement. And what you're looking at is from the doorway to the room. And what you see on that far wall is what the old school basement windows, 1 foot by maybe 2 or 3 feet. That is not legal to be sleeping quarters. If you had 12 children in this room and there was a fire and they could not get out, there's no way for them to escape this room. And there's no way for public safety, for help to get to them. This is one example of of many such examples that exist throughout the community. As far as what we are doing, I mentioned that if we haven't, we need to, as a city, identify the short-term rentals. We need to know where they are, how many there are, before we can start doing any kind of enforcement or tracking of complaints and so forth. So we have engaged the assistance of a firm. They go and they scrape online marketplace websites, local and the national ones, on a daily basis. And they give us a reporting every month of how many short-term rentals and their location. So this map shows, this was bed and breakfast before 1350. Kurt mentioned that there were illegal short-term rentals in the city before 1350. They were not there, there's always going to be some bad actors. We did, better job and worse job of tracking and keeping up with that over time. But this was what was legal on the books. There were 11 bed and breakfasts. You can see some of them track on our commercial corridors, but there are some within neighborhoods. A total of 87 units amongst those 11 bed and breakfasts. This is the map that shows short-term rentals today. This is, again, just jurisdictional boundaries. There are 815 unique listings. And you can see that there are a few areas. So off Soldiers Pass, Foothill South, up off Dry Creek. There are some areas, mostly gated higher end neighborhoods, that do have active HOAs, CCNRs, and residents who don't want short-term rentals in their neighborhood. But pretty much every other location in the city is not immune. So Kurt mentioned Mesa, down in the valley, even the communities that have a fair number of short-term rentals, you don't see this. You don't see the proliferation across every sector of the community. You see them concentrated around commercial cores or maybe sports districts, entertainment districts, but not this. We also, because we have the data, are able to look at how many of the properties are, different types. 64% are single family homes. 12% of our inventory are short-term rentals, but when I say that there are areas that do prohibit them, we see much higher numbers and concentrated in areas that don't have any restrictions and where it can be done, without any restriction. The growth since April 2020, which is when our company Lodging Res was able to give us, that they spent several months sort of scraping and compiling all of that data. So this is just about, less than a year and a half. We've seen 14% increase to the properties within the city limits and 18% overall, because we do track inside the city and we track Greater Sedona so that we have that context. So 1,300 units across Greater Sedona. And you can see from July to August, there's a bit of a leveling out. We also saw that a year ago. So to me, that speaks more to a seasonal trend, August being, hot or more down season. And it's kind of anyone's guess where this continues to go. Kurt talked about the legislation. House Bill 2672 did allow us to do two things. I guess one major thing, and that was to collect emergency contact information for all of the short-term rentals. Now, for most communities, because they can't business license them. Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks. Because we can't require short-term renters or rental owners to get a business license, the only way to be able to identify the properties and enforce on this is to hire a firm, as we have. The only other communities I'm aware that are doing that are Flagstaff and Lake Havasu City. And Scottsdale is just embarking upon this effort that we started a couple of years ago. So they're looking to us to kind of model what we have done. But we did, because we had the identification of who owns short-term rentals, we started to send letters in February of last year to advise owners that we do have this requirement now to register emergency contact information. So when there are nuisance calls, we have a point of contact. We sent second letters, March-ish, and third notice in the end of last year. So we now have about 85% compliance, which I think is actually really good. We started initially in August of last year with about 40%, and that's gone up. We have now started, since people do have sufficient notice, not just the letters sent directly to them, but also we've done some marketing campaigns and press releases and things like that to let people know. We are starting to cite people. So that is also a time-intensive process. We have to serve them if they're not local. They have to be hand delivered, or there's a lengthy process to that. But we are seeing good compliance with that. Now, the thing that we don't know is, will the emergency contacts respond when needed? So far we've had, it's a bit hit or miss with their responsiveness. But over time, as these things either turn over with property managers or so forth, and the emergency contacts change, if they don't notify us of that, we don't update it in the system. So it's just an ongoing, again, labor-intensive process. We also launched the hotline. So once we had sufficient emergency contact information, we felt confident in launching both a telephone hotline and a website form that people can go and lodge complaints about nuisance issues. So most of those have been trash and noise, with some other things like parking and lighting and so forth. And this is the data that we can use to make regulatory decisions and enact things. So in terms of the trash, the city council did pass a trash ordinance in January of last year, became effective end of February, or I'm sorry, of this year. And that is now requiring people, and this applies to everyone. So this doesn't apply just to short-term rentals. This is all the residential units. You have now a certain window where you can put your trash out and you have to get it turned back in. The other thing that we did, not so much because of complaints, but just things that our staff were seeing with these illegal conversions, and that was garages being converted to living space, which was now expanding the number of people who could be housed in that location and reducing parking at the same time. So we did change our land development code, and now all residential units over 1,500 square feet do require a garage. And if you convert that garage after the ordinance was passed, then you have to build a new garage, or you can't do the conversion. So that's just another thing that we tried to impose to address some of this. And right now we are in the process of revising our noise ordinance for some of these same reasons. And this is just I think they're worried about time, so this is, I think, my last slide, but this is the complaints by month. You can see a spike when we first launched the hotline, and then after we adopted the trash ordinance, we saw another spike, but we're between 30 and 40-ish complaints a month. And
Hi there, I'm Candace Carr Strauss, President and CEO of the Sedona Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Bureau. Thanks everyone for being here today. We are the official destination management organization for the destination of Sedona, in partnership with the city, as well as our nearly 800 business stakeholders in our singular tourism economy. Sedona is, after all, a destination. So as we've talked about how Mesa doesn't see the erosion of neighborhoods because the separation of short-term rentals is dissipated or only located in commercial areas, here as a destination, everywhere is attractive. I do believe that you can't manage something that you have no control over. As we've heard from the previous two speakers, we have very little ability to control what impacts of what are happening with short-term rental conversions. All we can do right now is mitigate some of those issues. Oops, wrong way, hold on. Did I go upside down? I got it right, just the arrows backwards, okay. I got it. So back in 2019, the city and the Sedona Chamber adopted our sustainable tourism plan. And this is the plan that we operate under today. It has 4 pillars that uphold it: our vital tourism economy, an amazing visitor experience for our 3 million visitors who come here a year, stewardship of our natural environment, and then lastly, but most importantly, quality of life for our residents, which is why we're all here today speaking. Quality of our tourism economy is really represented by our Chamber of Commerce hat. And as I mentioned, we have nearly 800 business partners across the hospitality spectrum that we are working with daily. We are a $1 billion industry in Sedona, and is really what allows us all to live here and experience the quality of life we have because of this economy. Otherwise, there would be no jobs. There would be no one able to live here because there was no way to make a living here. And then there would be no services for those who chose to live here. 2 of the top 3 contributors to the city's budget are related to sales and bed tax, of which visitors pay 77%. So I want to just set the stage because, again, this is not about pro short-term rental or anti short-term rental. The property management companies, which you'll hear from Jim next with Sedona.org, one of our largest property management companies for short-term rentals. I just want you to see what the different numbers are. And then as we're looked at to help, again, manage and mitigate in partnership with the city, how are we able to do this? So traditional lodging, hotels, motels, resorts, bed and breakfasts, we have roughly 4,391 rooms, roughly 5,000 rooms. We have only added 623 rooms in 20 years. That's barely anything. As you'll see on the following slide, when I compare that to short-term rentals and in the 5-year span that they have been legalized, it's quite shocking. So, oops, sorry, this is crazy. Oh, it's the wrong way. What I want to share over the past year, this is a little busy. All you need to see is that the red and blue line, during the course of last fiscal year, there were only 2 months that traditional lodging occupancy was tiny bit up and actually ended the year down in occupancy. So as everyone talks about, oh, there's too much visitation, there's so much visitation, a bit of anti-hotel sentiment, our hotels have brought less people here willing to pay more money to be here. And so that is our job. That's what we're trying to do, to bring a high value visitor who comes, respects our DNA, understands who we are, patronizes our art galleries, our good recreationists in our outdoor spaces, stewards of our public lands, and they patronize our hotels. Oh, am I gone? Did I go right? I give up. It's really weird. The forward is the left arrow. It doesn't make any sense. Sorry. It's counterintuitive. So, this graph, which you can't read the small print, but I wanted this to be available online for people to view afterward, and those who are watching virtually, is that essentially what you see is that our average daily rate, which is the amount we get per room, by the number of rooms, which is RevPAR, has gone up. So the story here told is we've brought less people in hotels who are willing to pay more money, which then pay bed tax and sales tax into the city's budget. Short-term rental inventory, on the other hand, is 1,323 units in the group. It's really hard. I've tried. So it's the entire house is for rent. And this has come about in the last 5 years. So when you think 623 hotel rooms, which to Karen's slide of all the mitigation, and management that hotels are being asked to do in building their establishment, parking, security, maintenance, trash removal, employee housing or payment in lieu of to provide for that employee housing. All of those things, 623 rooms in 20 years, and short-term rentals have brought what is the equivalent. And this actually is wrong. So I want to make sure we have facts out here. I mistyped today. I've been on the road since 5 a.m. this morning, traveling back from Nevada. It's actually 2.9 rooms is the multiplier. So if you take 2.9 rooms times the number of whole home rentals at 976, you get 2,830 rooms added in the last 5 years. So that's what I said. It is shocking. It's a lot of rooms with none of those things that we've discussed. Other considerations that we need to look at, and we are trying to grapple with, is our day trippers last year. This is a lot of the, again, mitigation, because these are not visitors that are coming and staying overnight. They are patronizing our retail establishments, our restaurants, contributing to sales tax. However, we're next to and adjacent to the fastest growing metropolitan in the nation with Phoenix. They surpassed Philadelphia this past year with the most recent census to become the 5th largest city in the United States. And so when it's 115 degrees and with concrete down in the valley, blacktop 120, sure, they're going to hop in their car and come up here. However, we don't speak to them through the same channels that we're speaking to our visitors, and trying to educate on respecting our place and what those behavioral expectations are when they come. So we're going to have to look at how do we speak to them differently. We saw a dramatic increase from FY 20 to 21 with COVID, and our neighboring states on lockdown. California, for example, completely closed. And so there was not a whole lot we could do with the day tripper, and we're working on that. In addition, the number of RV parks located throughout the greater Verde Valley. I asked at a meeting recently over in Cottonwood, what are the number of spaces for RVs? Because those people aren't paying bed tax, and so we don't know room nights or short-term rental rooms. And so how many parking spots are there? And no one could give me that number of how many RVs are legally allowed to be parked in our RV businesses throughout the greater Verde Valley. So we're looking at that, because again, that's another layer of people of coming, yet these are very different consumers, very different visitors to our market, consuming our place in different ways, and we need to speak to them in different ways so they hear us. Just as everyone watched through our allocation process, we've hit a pause on marketing this year. And I just wanted everyone to be able to see one of the pieces of creative that have gone out as we talk about Sedona really igniting our 5 senses, and that there is a 6th sense, and that is the sense of responsibility when you come here, of how to behave, how to steward our special place, and what we expect of you. So I just so proud of my team and this piece, and hopefully council and city are as well. And we wanted to share it with everyone while we had your eyeballs. I want to skip through the rest of this because I want to allow time for Jim to speak. These are the other 3 pillars and what we're doing under this destination management plan in partnership with the city during our marketing pause throughout the course of the rest of the year in our visitor experience realm, including our visitor center, in the environment, for resident quality of life. And this will be available again. Oops, that's the end. So those are my slides. That will be available online, and I'm happy at any time to speak to anyone about that. And we'll have further updates with City Council as we move through the fiscal year on that plan. But with that, I really would love to give time for Sedona Lodging Council President and owner, or excuse me, not Sedona Lodging Council, skip Steve. He's after Jim Bizley, CEO of Sedona.org, to come up to speak to property management companies, the role they play, how they can assist us and be partners with us in speaking to our visitors who are here through short-term rentals. Jim. Thanks.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Just a quick show of hands. Who here is in favor of short-term rentals? Oh, nightly rentals in Sedona, responsible rentals, whole houses. It's not bad. It's more than I thought. I really thought somebody might shoot me when they came up here, so I feel a lot better about that. We were trying to figure out, when we're doing this, is what is our role as a short-term vacation rental manager. And just to give you a brief history on me, we're in 8 destinations. Sedona is our second largest, and I think we're the largest luxury vacation rental manager here in Sedona. About 120 properties roughly. I think there's 1,300 roughly, more or less, in short-term vacation rentals. Brings in roughly $130 million a year. That is $4.5 million in lodging tax, $4.5 million in bed tax, and around $8.5 million in sales tax. So it's decent. I mean, it's you can use that money for certain things. When we were just talking about where do all of our employees live? You know, a lot of them don't make a lot of money. Where do they live? And yeah, a lot of them are from Cottonwood and Verde Valley. This is not an anomaly that's different than any other place. We're in Park City, Hawaii, Whitefish, Montana, Cabo San Lucas, Scottsdale, Dripping Springs, Austin, Texas, 38, Florida. I think that's it. Yeah. It's the same though. Over the last 3 years, we've seen the same type of thing where people are getting pushed out. The cost of real estate has gone berserk in every vacation destination. You've had the mass exodus from LA and most urban destinations. You've seen people moving out. If your kids don't have to go to school and you don't have to go to work, then the first thing that comes to my mind is I want to live someplace super cool. And Sedona is definitely one of those. And you're right, real estate has spiked. It's gone up probably doubled in the last 3 or 4 years, I bet, since COVID. And we've seen a spike in demand for vacation rentals because COVID or no COVID, people want to be with their families. They don't want to push the same elevator button that everybody else is pushing. So we have definitely seen a demand in that as well. For us personally, we're trying to make it a very luxury product, trying to do it responsibly, get the TPT licensing and everything, and make sure the houses are safe. The house that they showed there, that's in our rental pool. Yeah, and I can explain all about it, but if y'all want to hear. Careful? Should I be careful? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about it because I want to fess up to it and what that's all about. That is my house. I bought that house 3 years ago, and I plan to retire here in 8 years. And I went to the city and said, hey, I'm planning to do upgrades. I'm going to do the painting, the floors, change out the toilets, counters, baseboards, doors, fixtures, and was told it was a cosmetic remodel. And that I didn't, really have to do it. I did get a, electrician. I got a plumber when needed, and they didn't get permits either. And they didn't think I needed them. It wasn't until the ads went live that I started getting calls and letters saying, hey, you have to go through the permitting process. So I've been working with them for the last year. It's an extremely slow process, but yeah, I'm getting everything permitted. The biggest things, that room that you saw, I didn't build that room. It was a bedroom. It was a bedroom when I bought the house. The house was built in 1981, but in 1981, there weren't even plans. You didn't have to submit plans to the county or to the city to do a vacation rental. So that room right there was exactly as it was, except I put beds. And, maybe that's a lot of beds, but to be honest, that's what my kids wanted. We come here and stay here too. And that's what they wanted in that bedroom.
So we're going to ask you to hold questions and comments until the end.
Yeah. And yeah, happy to do it. But that's how the house was since 1981. I assumed that being that the house was built then, that it met codes. I wasn't not an expert in uniform building codes and everything like that. So you're right, the window's too small. It's too high. I didn't know that, but we're going through the process of getting it fixed. And a lot of the stuff that had been done there was a couple things I guess that they had done in the property before I ever bought the property. So I'm fixing those things too. It wasn't really any fault of my own, but I'm fixing it all, and I'm paying the price for it. and I'm working with the city to do it. So enough, I'm sure you can ask me a bunch of questions on that later. I'm happy to answer it. What we're trying to do as a vacation rental manager here in Sedona is, you already have 5 million tourists. I don't think anybody wants any more tourists in any 3 million? 3 million tourists. Sorry, I knew somebody would have the right answer. You don't want any more tourism to Sedona, but what I want and what we're really striving for is the quality of tourism in Sedona to increase. When I moved here in 1973, first came to Sedona in 1975, fell in love with it as a child. And I've been coming back multiple times every single year, and I'm here every month now. And this is where I am going to retire. The thing I want to mention about the type of guests that we're bringing here is that they are very mid-income to upper level income type guests. They spend on average, per guest spends around $190 a day. And that's not just in our rental. That has nothing to do with our rental. This is the economic impact that they bring to Sedona. They're using our restaurants, they're going to our shops, and they are spending roughly $190 a day. They stay much longer than a hotel guest. They stay on average 5.7 days. And they do a lot of stuff. In our company, we have full service concierge. So we're pushing them to use every single other business here in Sedona and really trying to increase the economic impact versus when I was a kid, came here, we just parked on our van, or my mom parked our van on Oak Creek, which you could do at the time, and ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That's not the type of tourist you necessarily want here in Sedona. You want them to spend a lot of money and help all the businesses grow. I don't think Sedona is a tourist town. It's always going to be a tourist town. So we're really trying to do a lot more responsible management of properties. We have the emergency contacts, people on call 24/7, and there's no parties, there's nothing like that. And it's squashed immediately. We have a zero tolerance policy for things like that. So I know I'm probably not the guy. Yeah. Is it? Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, probably not the guy you most like here, but we are trying to be a very, very strong, responsible manager who pays all of our bills and taxes. And I really hope that they take some of that lodging tax and put it to good use. Build affordable housing here in Sedona. In Park City, 10% of that money all goes for affordable housing. And that's what I hope that we can do with some of that lodging tax money here today. So anyway, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
You're up, Steve.
Thanks, everybody, for coming today. My name is Steve Segner, President of the Sedona Lodging Council. Al and I have coffee about 3 days a week, and we're involved with things in Sedona. We went to a meeting about a month ago for somebody who was going to run for mayor, and we thought we'd go listen to what he was talking about. And we got there, and they were discussing short-term rentals, and I listened, and I thought, my God, I hope everybody else in town doesn't believe this. There was a lot of magical thinking, a lot of wrong analogies. There was complaints about the city not doing things. I asked about what his plan was, and he said that they had a secret plan and they were working with attorneys. The one person next to me lived on the street, and the other person said that the city council was getting kickbacks from China. So I said to myself, I think we need to do something to get the information out. The hoteliers have taken it. We have to buy the expensive property. We had to be in commercial areas. We have to follow the rules. We have multiple organizations that watch us, but yet we're kind of getting blamed for what people see happening to Sedona. So I wanted to have a meeting where people could get the facts. Today is about not saying the short-term rentals are bad or good. We're just saying we all ought to be on the same wavelength of understanding we're kind of locked into a corner. We're going to have to live together. We're going to have to work together. The city's working very hard and diligently, and I wanted to bring that out. I've heard so many negative statements. To be honest with you, Connie and I built a hotel 20 years ago. We have 3 other units. All my units are listed on Verbo and these other sites. All our units are built on commercial properties zoned by the city, inspected by the city. And that's what we think should happen. Well, we're not going to change it. And so I wanted to have this meeting today as a test. Al and I talked a little bit about this. We like to try this format because as we go into the election season and things go down the line, we want to get things off the internet and we want to get people talking. And so we want to come up with a format where we can come up and have a good meeting. We can disagree, but we can agree to disagree. And so this is our first try at it today. We hopefully will come back by the sponsorship of the Chamber and the Lodging Council, and we'll do more of these community events. Because one thing we've lost with this Airbnb, we've lost community. Okay, we've chosen sides and we've got to get past it. Okay, even though, yes, you got 5 guys down the street and one of them is not a good neighbor, we just all got to get past it and start working together. City's there, they're putting the things in places. So let's start doing that. So today was our first step. I wanted to welcome everybody. I hope we could all leave here thinking I know a lot more. And my big goal today is at the end of this meeting, we wouldn't be seen on CNN or Fox News tonight. Okay, so it's been a great audience. Let's keep it that way. And let's all be considerate of each other. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Steve, and thanks, everybody. I know we are a little bit behind schedule, but I thought it was really important to give all of our presenters a lot of time because there's a lot of complex information. We started out, I said, there are so many people here in Sedona that are interested, and our first presentation from the city attorney showed that people have been interested in this for a long time in Sedona, and it's really, really a complicated history. So you've all been so patient. Thank you for that. Now we promise to give you an opportunity to voice concerns or ask questions, and we'd like to do that. Steve is going to help us with that. Chris, maybe you can start us off. If you could just come over here, we were going to have people line up over by the door because we think that there might be a number of people, and you might address your question particularly to someone on the panel, or if it's just a general question, we'll determine who on the panel thank you is most appropriate. We also, we have had Zoomers, and these Zoomers have been asking questions and they have been active attendees all along. So we'll allow Chris to ask the first question, but then we'll take some questions from our folks on Zoom.
I think this is for the city manager. I don't know if you can hear me. I'd be interested in knowing, just like you had 815 units, how many owners are there? I mean, I've heard of people owning 40 units or 50 units.
You know what? I don't have that information off the top of my head, but I have a stack of cards right here. We can get that information if we drill down into our data. So I can get that to you.
Cool. And then just one, I mean, I guess it's a comment. Like, I'm not opposed to Airbnbs. I stay in Airbnbs when I travel. That doesn't mean I don't think they should be regulated. If it does get to a point where we can put some regulations on, my request would be, is that like, there's some set number and no one gets 2 until people get 1. Sure. And I think that would help, because I don't want to, I got a dear family friend in the neighborhood who wants to augment her income, and she can really use it. Sure. And so I don't want to tread on her. So anyway, thank you.
Next.
I'm not going to, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not like going to say for or against short-term rentals, but just a couple of things to what Karen said. Most of the rentals.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Oh.
If we can just introduce, so we have names associated with who's asking the question, I think that'd be helpful for us if you don't mind.
I'm Tony.
Thank you.
I don't know, because everyone's using the same thing. If you wanted me to mask.
If you're
Okay.
comfortable taking your mask
Okay.
off, but people can do what they're
Okay.
comfortable with
Can
in
you hear me
terms of
better
leaving
now?
their masks
Okay.
on.
I was just going to address a couple things to what Karen said. So most of the rentals in the MLS, there are very few that the realtors put in there, and they usually do the higher price rentals. A lot of them do Trulia, Craigslist. They do their own thing. We have the management companies, Foothills Elite. So I'm big on statistics. So a lot of those statistics might not be accurate on, what the real numbers are. So another thing is with COVID, you know, a lot of our numbers from last year are not going to be, I think, something that we can look at, because a lot of people, they didn't want to be in a hotel touching that button that someone just touched. So we had a lot more people that wanted to have the family come, one from Vegas, one from Phoenix, whatever, and be in a house. So I think this year we'll see like a better indication of what those numbers are. So the one thing that you guys alluded to, that I don't know if everybody knows, starting January of 2019, Airbnb, Vrbo, I'm sure a lot of the other ones, required that the lodging tax is automatic. You don't have to do anything. The state gets that money, where before a lot of people like the Airbnbs because they didn't have to pay that and it lowered their numbers. So I know you send a lot of letters to people about trash and all that. If maybe the next time you send a letter, you could kind of alert people that they need to have that TPT number, because a lot of people are like, oh, what? I mean, I know some people that they've had Airbnbs for years, they don't even know what that is. And then they have that emergency contact, and that's just a little bit better way of tracking it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
I am William Spring, 17-year resident of West Sedona, 2305 Edgewood Drive. And by way of background, I'm an ex-municipal attorney in the Midwest. Most recently sat with City Manager Daines, who did Karen Daines Olson, excuse me, who did an able job of chairing the City 2022 Budget Committee, on which I and other citizens sat. Obviously, we have a problem. 2,800 additional hotel rooms. That's 200, and I have a question. This leads to a question. That's 280 room additional unregulated hotels in this town, nightly rentals. You wonder why your traffic's up. I've developed 3 hotels in my career. Average national statistic is 6 to 8 car trips per day per hotel room. So you do the math. Now I have a specific question for City Council Christianson. I believe, could you pull up, because there's an ongoing question about your second slide about 1305/2672. Could you pull that up for me? I've worked with House of Representatives John Kavanaugh in Phoenix post 1350. When 1350 was passed, it was actually drafted mostly by counsel for Airbnb Inc. Okay. He was the only then senator who termed out who voted against it. The only one. We are the epicenter of the storm. The train wreck is right here. We now have approximately, from what you saw there, 7,000 transient rentals, including existing hotel, real licensed B&Bs, and short-term rentals for 10,000 people. Nowhere in this state has this deluge. So the question has come up. When I first came in, I was totally confused, and I often am confused when you get older. When I read this handout, and this handout is missing the key provision from both Senate Bill 1350, engrossed version, which means the last one, and 2672, which was sponsored by Kavanaugh in response to try to limit the damage of 1350. And what I'm going to relate to is on the very first page of both of those laws is something missing from this handout. There are 3 items under B, and if you could, counsel, pull up, because it's corrected in your slide, and I have a question. The second slide you have shows 1350 pieces of it.
Correct. And I was not responsible for the handouts. I don't know what's in the handout. And
Okay.
the engrossed version of the Senate Bill 1350 has been amended a couple of times.
Perfect. That's not it. It basically has the 3 items that are correct. It was your second slide you presented, and it's a key question among lawyers all over the state.
It'd be slide 2 or 3. here.
You actually have the statute at the top. Then you have all 3 of the provisions that exist under basically B.
It says 13.
Hold on just a sec, because it is a huge question. You only had 2 slides, Counselor. Bingo, I think you got it. Okay, number 2, this is missing from the handout. I'm sure it's inadvertent because it's caused a lot of confusion in a lot of areas. And my question to you is, if it would be possible to opine, and I'm going to ask you this question on behalf of some of my friends on city council, to opine as to why number 2, which everybody says just doesn't apply, which says it's a carve out or a safe harbor, that you can in fact still, municipalities and counties can still adopt and enforce residential zoning ordinances, which we have here, which clearly prohibits what's going on, including ordinances related to nuisance and welfare. If the ordinance is applied in the same manner as property classified under 42-1203 and 42-1204, I have copies of both of those ordinances for you, Counselor. The first one says you have to treat them the same as owner-occupied residents. The second provision relates to residential property in foreclosure. So my question to you, and I would actually ask for an opinion, I don't like written statements or comments, as to why the city of Sedona cannot enforce their residential zoning code that exists now. And you know, that specifically prohibits nightly rental in residential zone neighborhoods. What precludes us from enforcing our existing residential zoning code?
So we can only enforce the existing residential zoning code in the same way we enforce it against other residences. And so we cannot, other residences, so as a private, if I owned a house here, I could have guests come. And it's basically how short-term rentals are working. They're exempt from the.
Hold on, are you going to charge your friends and family? Are you going to charge them rent on Airbnb to come and be with you?
I have no idea that people's individual, yeah, obviously,
Okay.
generally not. But it's just, we cannot enforce any ordinance that we have to apply it uniformly against all residential units.
I understand that. And the ultimate determinant of this is a court of law as a judge, all the way up to Attorney General Brinovich that I've had meetings with. He's just another lawyer with an opinion. The opinion that really counts as a judge. Can we in fact enforce our residential zoning code? Are we precluded under sections 1203, which says we have to do it uniformly to everybody that lives here, whether they occupy their residence or not? The second provision relates to properties in foreclosure, so it's meaningless. That's my question. That's simply my question is, has there been a written legal opinion that we cannot enforce our zoning code? Or if we can, what are the limitations on enforcing it pursuant to 1203 and 1204?
So we can enforce our residential zoning code, and we do, but we cannot prohibit short-term rentals. It's in the same ordinance, the same statutes, the first part.
Well, the first part creates the mandate for short-term rentals. The safe harbor, we won't be two lawyers doing this. This carve out or safe harbor is provision number 2, which says you can do it, but subject to certain limitations.
Certainly, only noise protection. It doesn't carve out an exception for short-term rentals in the 2. That would defeat the whole purpose.
Would
of
it
the
be
statute.
possible as me, just a dues-paying citizen slob that's been here for 16 years, to get an opinion from you on the question I'm posing to you as to why we specifically cannot enforce our residential use and
So
zoning
I think I already
ordinances?
answered that, and
So-
the answer shortly is I can't give you an opinion. I can only give.
If the
an opinion
council
to the city
asked you
council.
to, if the
So,
city
sir,
council
yeah,
asked you to,
Thank
could.
you for that question and that possibility. And if you could please return the microphone. Thank you. And so I think that is one possible course of action forward, and we want to invite people to raise those possibilities. I just do want to take a question first from our folks on Zoom. This is from Eric Gauthier. He asks if short-term rentals are subject to the same tax and safety burden as a commercial enterprise. And I think this was addressed by a slide that the city manager shared, but I just want to ask that.
Sure, thanks. For clarification, they are subject to all the same taxation as hotels. They are not subject to the safety regulations.
Okay. And
With
so,
the exception of property tax, they're not taxed the same in a commercial as a hotel would be. They have a residential assessment, but otherwise they pay the same taxes.
Right. And in the city, we don't levy a property tax. So in terms of city taxes, we have the sales and lodging or nightly rental bed tax, and they are subject to those.
and so more generally, is it a level playing field for the hotels to compete with the short-term rentals?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Harry William Danielewicz. I'm a millennial born and raised in Arizona. My question is, I never saw 100% bookings on the hotel rooms. Is there a way to allow workers who are in the millennial age group who can't afford $2,000 a month, 400 square foot studios to maybe short-term, like 3 to 6 months, rent hotel rooms from these organizations? We could work and live in town.
Thank you for your question. In other markets, that is being done. In Big Sky, where I came from, that exists now. And it is something that we can speak to our lodging folks about. See what's your
Thank you.
Sedona Lodging Council president's right there.
Unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, no, most hotels are running 90%, 100% on weekends. Right now, I know that we're booking 45 days out, so our October is full. So the hotels are full. And I'm building, my wife and I are building an employee housing unit under the city's regulations. We're going to rent it out for no more than $800 a month. My net cost to build it is $500,000. That's where we're at. And I have to do it because I have to have employees. It's very fearful of what's happening and what's coming down the pike.
Sure, Jim.
You know, vacation rentals, I was just looking at it, our stats show that we're 49% occupied. So it's much lower than hotels. But it's usually like Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. If there was a way that I could help and put people in the vacation rental on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I would be happy to do it. Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure you have a card.
Hello, I'm Deborah Stengel. I'm a 20-year resident of Sedona. I'm the founder and president of Save Our Sedona. I'm also a business owner here in Sedona. I've had Sedona Soul Adventures for over 19 years, and we have 13 employees and 60 subcontractors. So the biggest problem that's going on for me as a business owner is not having affordable housing and doing everything that we can to try to help our people with that. I have two questions. The first one is the information for the meeting today said that we were going to discuss ideas for moving forward as a community. Are we going to be talking about that, or is that this with people just having input?
Yeah. So we were hoping to do that initially, and then we had just an overwhelming response. Typically for a meeting like this, we might have 15 to 30 people and we'd all sit around a table. We'd have a few handouts, but it turns out that the legal history of this was so complicated, and the many examples of some we discussed very specifically today. We did change that a little bit because we just wanted to review the facts and make sure that everyone understood the facts. Having said that, we are very open to discussing possible strategies. A few ideas have been put forward here. It's a little bit difficult with this size of group to have a dialogue, but you're welcome to offer suggestions. And if people are interested, and we'll send you another survey, we may have another forum where we have smaller breakout groups where we can facilitate more of a dialogue.
Well, I was an attorney for 20 years before I retired from that and moved to Sedona. And I wrote 2 pieces of legislation for the state of Nebraska during the time that I was an attorney. And it appears to me that the only thing that we can do is to amend the legislation that is already on the books and to get local control back. So my question is, does the city have plans for being involved in that, for drafting legislation, for lobbying, for legislation?
I'll answer that. So the city continues to work with the league, and every year we will sponsor, and the league will sponsor legislation to amend the ARS 9-500.39 that you see on the screen to return some form of regulation to the city. So far, it's been unsuccessful in our efforts. The city is also considering, city council will be considering hiring outside lobbyists to help with those efforts. And so the city will every year is committed to returning some control. We work with we try to work with the online hoteliers or the short-term rentals, so Airbnb and Vrbo. They it's interesting. They'll say that it's okay to have a 2% cap on residential units being short-term rentals or 3% or whatever happens to be in San Diego, Seattle, places like that. But then in Arizona, they believe that no cap is appropriate. And it's like, what makes us different than other communities? And so we'll continue to advocate for that, and the city will continue to lobby for this, for local control.
So it appears to me that our legislators, the governor, the state government needs to hear from us, because legislation has been introduced the last 2 years and has gone nowhere because there hasn't been a huge groundswell of people who are affected like we are here, like people are in Tucson, like people are in Flagstaff. So anyone who is here who wants to become part of a citizens organization, please go to saveoursedona.com, sign up, become part of what we are doing. We're going to be having another meeting in another couple of weeks. Get on our email list and I'll send out information to you. I totally believe that until they really understand how this is impacting our town, that we won't be able to have any kind of control over what's happening here.
Thank you. I'd like to ask one question to clarify a thought to the city attorney. If in fact magically a law was written that changed 1350, gave back control to the city under 207, would most of the Airbnbs in place now be grandfathered in?
Yes, correct. So far, every law that's been proposed would be subject to still Prop 207, the Private Property Rights Protection Act. And so we would effectively be able to cap it at the 12% that it is now, or wherever it ends up at in that 3-year period. And then you could slowly, over however many years it takes, whittle it down to a reasonable cap of some percentage.
Okay, Mayor Adams, we have just one question before you, and this is from Carol Doris. This is for the city manager. How much in taxes did Sedona collect from short-term rentals in 2020? And what percentage of taxes does that represent?
So the short answer to that is that is something that our finance director knows, and I don't know. So taxes in Arizona are extremely proprietary in terms of that information. And because there are just a handful of online marketplaces and then local management companies that remit on behalf of those 800 and some odd units, we cannot disclose what percent of the pie are short-term rentals. So we are looking at ways that we might be able to extrapolate the data of existing hotels. That's a much bigger number, but not to run afoul of the intention on the disclosure, or inability to disclose that information. So our total bed tax number is about $7 million a year. So that's everything. And our sales tax is about $28 million a year.
Okay, and one more question. This will be the easiest question all day, I promise. This is from Jamie Kessler, and that is 2021 January through September?
2021, I think on our slides, it was not fiscal year information, it was calendar year information. So that should be
January through September.
January through September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Adams?
Hi, my name's Rob Adams. I live in Broken Arrow. I wanted to, I guess, address a question, a comment to Mr. Bizley. You had commented that your goal was really to provide a safe, quality environment for people that are staying in your properties, but then I heard you say that you didn't know about the codes in terms of the safety when you built the bedroom in the bottom of your house. So it would seem to me that one of your priorities would be to make sure that you're familiar with the city codes so that the properties that you are leasing out to your clients are safe. How much attention do you pay to that?
Sure. So that house was built in 1981 and it was always a bedroom. When I bought it, it had beds in there and everything. So I didn't realize that the window was sitting 5 inches too high. And it was also too small. I really did not realize that. And so, yeah, we're going through the process of doing that. I guess what we'd have to do is have every single property inspected by the city, because I'm not an expert in that. And we try to do the best we can. We put CO2 and carbon monoxide and smoke detectors and everything that we like. Park City, for example, you have to get a nightly rental license, and the city inspects the property every single year. So they go through and they do the smoke detectors and CO2s, and they check all these things. I'm not an expert in it. I wish I was, but I would love that. I think that makes more sense and even better for professional vacation rental managers to say that not only do we do CDC cleanings, but also that the properties have been thoroughly inspected by the city to make sure that they're safe. But the home that's how it was built. And I had no clue that it was literally 5 inches off and the window was too small.
The other comment is that, I hear from the chamber and from you folks about primarily the revenue that's generated for the benefit of the city. But I think that there is some major impacts that are going on to the quality of life for the citizens that live here. And so I would hope that your focus, or at least part of your focus, would be to how can you address that? How can you make this a better place for people to live in, as well as providing the business services that you provide? Do you have any kind of strategy for that?
I'm going to retire here. I've been coming up since the 70s, and this is where I'm going to retire too. So I have that same concern. A lot of how do we address that? I guess we should probably consider minimizing the number of people. My house there, that's a 5-bedroom. The average number of people is actually 8. So usually it's golfing buddies or it's yoga people and that sort of thing. So it's not a lot of people, although we do go around to every single neighbor and we let them know, hey, this is a vacation rental. Here is our contact information. If you have any disturbance whatsoever, we want to know about it first. We also put in what they call like noise aware, which is something that tests the decibels. And if it gets above a certain decibel, then we immediately call the guest. And we have a 0 tolerance policy for parties, smoking, anything like that. So if anything like that does come up, then we immediately squash it. And basically we have a 16-page lease agreement that says you're out, you can't be in this property. And then we put them on what we call the blacklist, that they can never be rented to again. So I'm going to live here. Actually, I'm here every month. So I feel the same way. And I would like that. I would like to have like a very, very responsible type vacation rentals and make it a good community for everybody. The tax dollars are good, but you're right. That's not good enough for what we're talking about here. So I do want to have responsible vacation rentals, and any guidelines that you have, I'd be happy to listen to. I'd be happy to sit on any panel, any team. And that's why I came here today, even though I knew it was going to be controversial.
I appreciate the fact that you're here. I really do. I just wanted to share a story that happened in our neighborhood. I live in Broken Arrow, and the portion of our neighborhood in Broken Arrow is actually governed by covenants and restrictions. The association's been in effect since the 1950s. But we have 3 short-term rentals in that neighborhood. And I have sent out in each case a notice to the title company and both the seller broker and the buyer broker that short-term rentals are prohibited in our neighborhood. Actually, we went through a process where we looked at our covenants and restrictions and amended and updated them so that the language was very clear regarding that. Regardless of that, the realtors went through with the sale. Now, I don't know how well the buyer was notified about that, but I mean, that's kind of buyer beware as well. So that's going on. And, to me, that's nothing but pure greed. The realtors have to be held accountable as well when they're doing transactions in neighborhoods and make sure that in the neighborhoods that they do have covenants and restrictions against the short-term rentals, that they just don't go there. They just don't go there. So again, I want to thank you. I appreciate the fact that I personally prefer that there's a professional management company. If we're going to have short-term rentals, there's accountability there. There's somebody to go to. So, I'd really appreciate whatever you can do to help us as citizens
with our lifestyle not being so adversely impacted by these short-term rentals.
Okay. So I just have to comment that we have a former mayor of Sedona being followed by a former mayor of Flagstaff. So Mayor Evans.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I apologize for being late, but as soon as I saw the announcement, I knew I had to be here to see if there had been any updates or changes in any laws, and there have not been. So I want to just say I am the former mayor of the city of Flagstaff, Arizona. I am the former chair of GAMA, which is the Greater Arizona Mayors Association. I want to say thank you to Mayor Sandy, because Mayor Sandy has been championing this the entire time she has been in office. So I thought that was important for people to understand that. I also wanted to point out that Senator Kavanaugh, while he might not have voted on the original bill, he was definitely not helpful when it came to trying to get it rescinded, changed, or anything. And finally, when he came on board with the mayors, he couldn't even get a hearing in his committee. So I just want to make sure we know that about Senator Kavanaugh. So in short, this has been the #1 issue for decades. The city of Flagstaff has had outside lobbyists working on this. What needs to happen is 1487, which was not covered today, needs to be rescinded. That's why the cities have not taken some bold steps and actions, because if they do and they're found to be against the state law, they will lose all of their state shared revenue. And that is a major issue, because that's not defined as just for the municipality. You also have universities, nonprofits, other people who have state shared revenue, pots of monies that may be impacted. The second thing that needs to happen is SB 1350 just simply needs to be corrected. It's not working appropriately. It's not doing what the shared economy is not working, okay? It works for some of the grandparents and those types of people, but somehow they've included short-term rentals in it. And in the state statute, and this is something that Mayor Sandy has been on since day one, really helping everybody understand, the state statute needs to be changed. Right now, it treats all rentals the same. It needs to treat long-term rentals, residential rentals, differently than it does short-term rentals. So that's what needs to happen. And you do that by electing people who want to do that.
I'm Ernie Strauss, followed by a former vice mayor of Sedona. So we got all the legal folks up. What I wanted to ask is there any possible maximum number of people that can occupy a residence? Now, and that wasn't covered. And frankly, I know that the last two in 2020 and 2021, the last two bills that were offered, both of them had limitations on the number of occupants. They were 2 per bedroom, up to a maximum of 4 bedrooms. So that would be 8 people, plus 2 for every 1,000 feet above 3,000 square feet in a home. And both of those failed to pass the legislature, okay? So I know that that limitation doesn't exist, but I wondered if, could a home like right down across our street, my name is Ernie Strauss, by the way, and I live in the Chapel area. Right down the street from me, there were 16 people in a 3-bedroom home and 5 vehicles there. So, this was, you wonder, what if there were 30? Nobody can do anything. There are no limitations whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Is that really true?
That's really true. So there are some things in the building code that limit, like based on number of people you might have sleeping in a bedroom, the size of the bedroom or size of rooms. Our land development code, I think we've since changed the definition, but it talked about a number of unrelated adults, never contemplates children. And related adults is sort of, how do you define related adults? As far as 16 people being in a small 3-bedroom, 2-bath, that would mean that from the city standpoint, we would need to figure out how do you impose on, not allowing you to have 16 people at your home for an event, for a reunion, for a party. Now, some of the definitions talk about domiciled. So are you domiciled there or not? The long or short answer of it is completely unenforceable. So when those legislative changes got proposed, from my perspective, it didn't matter at all if they got passed or not passed, because in fact, my preference just from a management perspective was that they did not get passed, because at the end of the day, then the community would look to the city and say, enforce this. And there's really no way to enforce it. I don't know how many people are inside your house at any given time. And the only way for me to know that is to get a warrant. No judge is going to give me a warrant to go into your house. And then you can just say to me, oh, well, I have a party right now. This isn't a permanent situation. And then what? So it's unenforceable.
Okay. And just a comment too, and that is that just for everyone's edification, there was this Kavanaugh that we spoke about earlier. He did hold a joint session or hearing in a committee that had senators and representatives. Coral Evans was there, Sandy was there, 3 additional city councilors were there. My wife and I were there, and we testified. Most of the people in the room testified. And again, we were not opposing short-term rentals. What we were opposing was commercial enterprises, being operated in residential neighborhoods. And that would be limitation of X number of bedrooms, et cetera. But the point is, though, that if the only way I think that we get things changed is to elect different representatives, and Coral was one of those that we should have elected, by golly, and we didn't do it. But and frankly, it is not a Republican Democrat thing. Frankly, there are just as many Democrats that have supported this bill as there have been Republicans. Matter of fact, the last bill passed the Senate 27-3 and then failed in the House by 43-17. So, I think that's what we have to do, is to insist that the next people that we elect take a position on this that allows local control.
Thank you. Steve, thank you, Vice Mayor Strauss. Yes, and this question is for you. So how then is the hotel industry trying to make the resident experience better? Why is that question directed only at short-term rentals?
The hotels in Sedona and the Lodging Council is together to attract high-end visitors for multi-days. We have always worked in Chicago, back east, New York. We want to bring people in who are going to stay, enjoy, spend $1,000 a day eating and dining. That's been our clientele historically. Historically, Sedona's always been a little steep, a little expensive. And that was our clientele. When the Airbnb came along, they opened up another whole layer for people to come into our town. We work diligently with the chamber and the city. And my mantra has always been, how do I improve the visitor experience? I've talked to the city council, I've talked to everybody and say, how do we sit down? Where do people sit? Where do they walk their dogs? Walking districts, we worked on a walking district. We worked on districts so people can walk to dinner and walk back. So the Chamber of Commerce and the Lodging Council, this is our mantra. This is what we work on. And the reason we're having this today is we want a better Sedona. And if these people are going to live here and they're going to come here, We have to improve our visitor experience. That means we can't have trailheads blocked up. You know, we need transportation to get people to trailheads. We need parking places. And I can guarantee you, I've talked to all the people on the city council, we're all on the same wavelength, but it's a process. And this is the first process I think today I wanted to get across is this isn't magically going to change. This isn't magically going to disappear. You know, we have bed tax money. We are a very successful city. We have money and we have a very astute management team. You know, and I just want people to stop throwing stones and say, how do we all get together and make this happen? Years ago, I had the idea for the history walk. City gave me carte blanche and we did it. So we can do these things. So let's stop throwing stones. And I wanted to give a quick example. The other day, I had a health inspector in from Coconino County. They inspected our rooms. I had to have another company come in and look at all our exit lights, and I have to pay a fee of $1,000 a year for that. I have to have my sewers pumped. I have all kinds of regulations. I'm just a little hotel. The bigger hotels have tons of them. My question is, how can the hotels take our experience and help the people with these homes give the same experience? We're willing to help. Okay, why can't we help you on health and safety issues? Why can't we help you with concierge? The hotels right now, we all pick and choose where we send people. We don't send people to Devil's Bridge. You know, we all got to work together. And I think the chamber is working on this. And I think we will be putting things together. We're putting together a film that we'll be sending out to people before they arrive. What if we could get everybody coming to Sedona to see a 3-minute video, welcoming them to Sedona and saying, by the way, treat us like you treat your home. We're working on all these programs. They're all so please, let's all work together. And I'm happy to get the Airbnbs together and let's sit down and talk and we'll work together. Okay, we're all in the same boat.
Thank you, Stephen. I
Can I
just want to give Candace an opportunity to respond because that's very much in alignment with what she shared earlier.
Oh, I just wanted to mention that we have subscribed recently to Key Data, which is a comparable technology platform to Smith Travel Research. So Smith Travel provides the hotel occupancy and ADR and RevPAR, which we discussed. Key Data does that same thing on the short-term rental side. And so we will be working with Jody and the coalition of short-term rental property management companies to come together around that platform. So again, we can see what is the state of tourism in that half of the destination and carrying capacity, what's going on with it, how can we all work together, how can we communicate uniformly through the short-term property management rental companies like we do through our hoteliers with their concierge, with their front desks, et cetera, videos in room. So we are working on that right now. We signed that with the new fiscal year and are working to get the partners to all submit. And when we have a sample size that is respectful of private property information related to their revenues, then we can use that with Smith Travel Research at city council meetings as have been done in the past to present the full picture.
Thank you. And sir, I'm going to take just one Zoom question, which I think will be quick, and then we'll have your question be the last one because we want to respect everybody's time that we set for this event. This will be for the city manager and or the city attorney. And I think this is just a clarification question. So am I to understand that when a residential property becomes a commercial business, there is no code or building inspections to protect our neighbors?
That's correct. So, right, under 1350, the city cannot impose anything additional. It's treated just like any other residential, even though the use is different.
Thank you. That was from Robert Albrecht.
Just to clarify a little bit, if it became a commercial business like an OHV business operating out of the house, and we would be able to regulate. The one exception is short-term rentals,
which would not be permitted in a residential neighborhood.
Thank you. Sir, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Pat Harrison and my wife and I just moved here a month ago. Thank you. I first came here to Sedona in 1995. How many were here living in Sedona in 1995? You have seen and witnessed firsthand what's happened to this community, right? This area. When I came here, as you well know, nothing was here. I mean, it was like a sanctuary. It was so beautiful, and it still is. We're still in awe of where we live now. We're so proud of being here. One of our neighbors is moving to Portugal, and he's leaving because his community, his neighborhood has turned into what? Short-term rentals. He says, I don't know my neighbors anymore. I've lost that community touch with my neighbors. And we felt sorry for him and his wife. And I hear people talking about what's going on. And I guess I got to pose this question to the city council. Is there a 5-year or 10-year strategic plan that what will we look like in 5 or 10 years in Sedona? What will this place look like when you retire? Will it be even more explosion than what we have now currently going on? Or other plans to kind of, even things out, level the playing field where employees can afford to live here and earn a living wage to stay here. We've been told Cottonwood people that are working here no longer can live in Cottonwood because they're going up with the cost of living there. So where does it stop? I guess I got to ask the people that are in the decision-making mode, what do we look at down the road in terms of Sedona, Arizona? What is this beautiful place going to look like in 5 to 10 years? And I guess that's my question.
Sure. That's a really timely question. And so when you say the decision makers are you, first of all. Second of all, in 2014, the voters passed our community plan. Basically, that is the city's general plan. It has a number of different focus areas. It has a vision. We called it Vision 2020 and beyond. And that was a process that included a very, very extensive amount of public input to identify what those things are. Some of the priorities were diversification of housing and affordable housing, sustainability, preservation of our natural environment, traffic and transportation, transit. These were some of the things that were included in the plan. We are about to, in fact, on October, I think it's the 13th, it's the first council meeting in October, we will be doing a kickoff with the council about the update to that plan. So it's a 2-year process of updating it. And this is where the community gets to say, are these priorities, is the vision for the future for our general plan consistent? Is it the same and it just needs some tweaking? Because when we adopted this in 2014, short-term rentals were not a thing. That wasn't even on anyone's radar. So it is not addressed in the plan. But are those priorities still priorities, or has the community perspective and sentiment on what the future vision is changed enough to where we would take a radical shift in that plan in our update?
Okay. And one last comment, and I don't know where the gentleman is, but he's right. We can do some grassroots organization and get things going, but the decision makers, sometimes it falls on deaf ears. They don't listen. They put these policies into place, and that's the way it's going to be. So I'm with the gentleman who said we need to look at our elections in the next couple of years, what's going to happen, and we need to get out and vote. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I'd like to make one comment about that comment. It's okay to say that change isn't happening, but what happens when we apply for density? The people push back. What happens when we apply for apartment buildings? People push back. It's easy to say, oh, we should be doing these things. And then when push comes to shove, this NIMBY comes out in us. And I'm using that term because it's happening in this town. It's happening all over America. Rich white people are determining how their cities are developing, and shame on us. We need housing. We need apartments. And my God, it's not wrong saying it's a 3-story building in the appropriate place. So let's all get behind our city council sometime and quit throwing blocks in front of them, because we need housing. I see hotel rooms that are being built as we speak. How are they going to find 80 employees? We have people here tonight who had to leave early, who manage hotels that are going back and changing beds. We have restaurants that are closing 3 days a week because they don't have employees, but yet we stand back in our little bubble and we throw roadblocks in from. We have to stand up as individuals and start saying we have to share.
All right, everybody. I think this is great. I don't think we're going to end up on CNN, which is what we hope for. Please join me in thanking our panelists, and thank you again.